Hey everyone, this is Sandeep back with 100 days of coding JavaScript. And today's video, I'm going to talk about a really special object in JavaScript called the document object model or DOM or the document object. So if you see, right, we are building this random password generator application. We have built the HTML for this project. We have written the CSS in the last video, and our application is looking really, really beautiful now. And now we need to write some logic for this application, right? So say suppose I want to generate a password using this application. I have to click on the generate button. Then I need to grab all of these values, this length value, if the user has selected the numbers and include special characters also. I need to grab all of these values, right, to generate the password. When I click on the copy, I need to copy the generated password from this text input. Now, let me expand this. And if I right click and click on inspect, if I go into my browser developer tools, if I go into the elements panel, what you see here is the HTML, which we have written, right? Now I need some way to grab the element or elements from this HTML. And how can we do that? To do that in JavaScript, we have a special object called the document object. So I'll better, open the console here on the top, right? Let's maximize. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, clear this. So I can type something called a document and press enter. See that? This is my entire document. So the HTML which you see here, right? So behind the scene, the browser generates something called a DOM or a document object model. So this document is nothing but the document object model, which has different name value pairs, right? We have the head element, we have the body element, right? So these are all the objects. Now we are mostly interested into something called document dot body. If I enter that, see that we're getting the entire body of my page where I can see my panel. This is the object, right? This heading one is an object. This form is also an object. And inside those form, the input element, div elements, everything, JavaScript has created this object, this name value structure for us. Now, as this document is an object, it definitely going to have some properties and methods. So we're going to talk about some of the methods first, right? The methods which will help us to grab the element. So say suppose I want to grab this element, right? I want this input, or maybe I want to grab the generate button. How can I do that? So there are several methods which are available which I can use to grab all of these elements. So I'll go back to my HTML and we're going to talk about the first method, right? So say suppose I want to target this generate button, right? Because when I'm going to click on that button, I need to run some logic, right? So I'm going to give it ID. So in HTML, you can give ID to any of your HTML element. So you can give the ID to form, to div, to h1, input, label, anything, any element, right? So I'm going to give this an ID of for now, I'm just going to call it, I'm going to copy and paste this only, right? I'll give it an ID of generate button. Okay. Now, if I want to grab this button, target this button using the document object, I can write a function. So if you see here, right, you should be able to see that ID for the button. See that I have that button with the ID. Now I can use a function called document.get element by ID. This is the function provided by document object, and I can pass an argument called the ID of this button, right? So I'm going to pass generate button, and if I press enter, see that it's going to return me that button. Now this is an object. the button object. So you can give ID to any of these elements. You can use the get element by ID function and you can target any element. Now I have this element, so this is an object and I can do whatever, like I can add events to it, or maybe if I want to add some CSS to it, I can do that. So I'll show you, right? If you want to change the CSS of this button, maybe, right? So I can target that button. Then I can use something called the style property, and maybe I'll change the background color. Let's try to change the background color is equals to, right now it is, I'll change it to green. Let's try that if it works. See that? So I can target the elements and I can change its properties, right? So I'm going to clear that. The next method which I want to talk about is document.getElement by tag name. So say suppose I want to target this form, right? So we have one form only here. Maybe we will target the div elements, right? So let's target or let's target the button element. That would be a very good example. So I'll say document dot get elements get element by tag name. So tag name is nothing but name of the HTML element, and I want to target all the buttons, right? So I'll say button, and if I press enter, as I have two different buttons in my page, right? You see here, I can see all those two buttons here. See that? So it's returning me HTML collection object. This is similar to array, like array, but it is not actually array. It's a different object altogether, but I can grab all the buttons using the tag name. I can target elements using the class name also. Like you have seen in the last video, we have given different class name to our element. Like say suppose I want to target all the form field inside my random password generator, right? So I can write document dot get elements by class name, and I can give the class name here. Say suppose form field. And if I press enter, see that I got three different elements. This one, the include numbers, and include special characters. So these are three different divs I have inside my random password generator. And each one of them is having a class name of form field. And I can target those elements using document.getElement by class name and the name of the class. So you can see there are a variety of ways. There are several ways of targeting the document in JavaScript. Now let's talk about some of the popular methods which we use on a regular basis. So there's a method called document.querySelector. Now this is really nice method where I can target one element, and now I can pass what I can pass here inside this query selector function is some kind of query. So say suppose I want to grab the button with an ID of generate button. So it's like writing the CSS selector inside this function. So I can say generate button and see that it's returning me that generate button. For ID, I'm using the hash. Say suppose I want to target the elements using the class name, right? So I can query selector and maybe like how we have targeted all the form fields, right? Same I can do using form field. So this is more of what? Writing querying how we query the CSS, how we query the elements inside a CSS. Same thing I'm doing here. Okay. So we are getting the form field, but I'm getting only the first form field, right? So query selector method returns the first element inside the document, whichever first element it has found, right? And say suppose I want all the form fields, right? I can do that. I can write document dot, I can use a method called query selector all, and it's going to return me all the elements having the class name of form field. If I enter now, see that? This time I'm getting the different object called node list. right? So it's like array. You can see I'm getting all the dev with a class name of form field. So most of the time, I'm going to use either document.getElementById function, or I'm going to use the query selector, because mostly we want to target the one element at a time, right? So this is about, document object model DOM. So we have a document object, and document object has several methods to target the elements. So why not let's target the elements needed to write the logic for a random password generator app. So maybe I'm going to close this for now, minimize it, okay? And let's write our JavaScript. Let's create a JavaScript file here. I'm going to call it index dot, maybe I'll call it app.js maybe, or index.js, whatever. You can name it anything. So let's go with the standard of index.js. And I'm going to include this JavaScript. It's just here. So I'll use the script tag for that. And the source attribute index.js. Okay, so I've included the script now. Just to check whether the script has been included or not, let's put a console.log here, say hello. And if I inspect, I should be able to see the hello. So JavaScript is working fine. Now let's target different elements. So we'll keep the HTML also open. So I need to grab the password input, right? So how to grab the password input element? So I'm going to create different variables here. So this will be password input. I'll call it password input. I'll use document dot get. I'll use the query selector. Query selector. And what is the class name of my password input? I'm just going to grab that password input, and we use query selector, giving the dot and the password input. That way we can access the elements with a class name of whatever name we have given it, right? Next, I would need the another element, this length element, right? So let's grab that. So length, GTH, length input, right? So I'll say document dot query selector, and let's see what is the class name for our length input. We have length inputs. I'm going to remove this ID. We are not going to use the IDs. Okay, I need the ID actually for the for attribute. So I'll keep that. So length input, and we need to use the dot because we are using the class. Next, I want to grab the include number and special characters also. Let's grab them quickly. So this is include, or maybe I'll call it numbers checkbox, right? And I'll use document dot query selector. So most of the time we are going to use query selector. Sometimes we are going to use query selector all also. And what's the class name for my symbols? So it's a symbol input, right? So we are calling numbers input. Let me call it symbols checkbox dot. So next, I need to grab special characters. I think I need, that's a number checkbox only. So numbers checkbox, and I don't need to target the symbol actually. So that was the length input. I was doing something wrong. Okay, so length input is length input, numbers checkbox is actually number input. So I'm going to grab that and paste it here. Number input, right? That's number checkbox. Next is symbol checkbox, and document dot query selector. Symbol, what is name of symbol? Symbol input is the class name. Let's put that. And finally, I have to grab the generate and copy button also. So let's do that quickly. Generate btn. I'm going to call it btn document dot query selector. And let's copy and paste the class name. That's good practice so that we don't have the typo. And the last one I need is the copy period. So again, I'm going to use document dot get query selector and dot, what's the name of copy button? Class name. I'm going to grab the class name, put it here. See that? So we've learned the document object model in this video, right? And I've grabbed all the elements because to write the logic, in JavaScript, I'm going to need all of these elements. That's why, I have grabbed all these elements. And in the next part of the video, we'll start writing the logic for this password generator application. And I'm going to talk about events also. Like we have the generate button, we have the copy button, right? So when I'm going to click on it, how to handle that click, how to write that click event in JavaScript. With that, I'm going to stop here. I hope you understood how to grab elements from the document object model, and how to use them in our application. I'm going to see you in the next video. Until then, you take care, goodbye, and thanks for watching the video.